Oh, banger.
Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at simbody.com. You're really, really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks Kicks.
Oh boy, and we are back, we're set, and we're live, getting ready for UFC Fight Night, Holm versus Vieira. But listen, I know the people, they're less excited about this fight than they are about the people's main event, that's a co-main event. And why couldn't that just be a 5-round fight? Because Michel Pereira sometimes gets tired and sometimes conserves himself, taking on Santiago Ponzinibbio. I know a lot of people really looking forward to that one over there in the chat. Buffo on the beat, Jason Ward, Matt Lopez, Dave Woodman, Kicks Good. We got Voodoo, Billy Brown, who else? John Hansen, Danny Mora. So listen, overall, it is one of those cards that, is it going to be the hottest topic this week? And I mean, there's a mediocre boxing card on DAZN today that's going to get more headlines, but Holly Holm, former champ, she has that win over Ronda Rousey, and of course the subsequent loss to Miesha Tate for Ketlen Vieira. Beating Miesha Tate her last time out in a bit of a dud. The old 48-47 win over Tate, and obviously sending Tate to flyweight. Exciting stuff, but overall it should be a fun one. Matthew Morris hanging out from Portugal. We also have Tyler over there, Reese Ward, Clay. It is a poppin' and hoppin' chat. Lausnan over there as well. And if you can toss us a like, it certainly would mean a lot to us and to the channel and to the show. But Matt, this is one of those cards that I know there's select fights that we're really looking forward to that kind of get us up on a Saturday morning.
And I'll be honest, I'm more excited for this main event now than I was at the start of the week. Because the thing about a Holly Holm main event is, it's either not going to be very exciting and then she wins by the most eye-catching knockout you've ever seen, or it will be one of the more tactical performances you've ever seen. But with Ketlen Vieira and her coming forward type of style, I think it will make Holly Holm try to engage a little bit more throughout this fight. Fingers crossed, exactly, because nothing's guaranteed in this sport, but I think it will be a good fight. But like you said, every person I've talked to this week about the fights has brought up the co-main event with Ponzinibbio and Michel Pereira. That's going to be one of those fights where I don't want to say it's a lock for fight of the night, because anytime I even come close to using that word, it basically curses the whole show and my predictions, but I don't know how that fight's not going to deliver.
Thanks for that one, and hopefully it doesn't. I will say this, the fight that I was most looking forward to this weekend was last night's main event. JDS threw a shoulder out, and Yorgan De Castro threw hammers, but none of them landed because he was too tentative to close the distance. So that was a fight, and then the co-main of that was Thiago Silva and Hector Lombard. I was so amped for that one.
Wow.
And then the illegal knee. So ultimately, it was just like watching UFC card. A lot of illegal things. What are we going to call them? Sometimes they're no contests, and sometimes they're DQs.
MMA is a weird sport.
It is very, very weird. So as we all know, Matt, we're going to throw it on over to our fight of the night screen, and we're talking about, look at that, Ponzinibbio and Pereira.
Well,
it's a fight you can get excited about. And I mean, we've got So-So over there in the comments section saying Medic is a Yeah, I don't know what those are. I can't pronounce that word. It starts with an L, guys. Trust me. Holly Holmes, not a favorite, Prince Vegeta-san says. And Oliver, 2021 was much better, and it's not even funny. Oliver, they have so many cards they have to fill. This is why we get this. But again, this fight should be something exciting up at 170 pounds. And Michel Pereira wearing shoes looks like a mammoth of a man next to Santiago Ponzinibbio.
It would have been great to see Pereira compete back when he could wear shoes in the UFC. Just help his takedown defense a little bit. Make those kicks a little bit more thunderous. This should be a great fight. Everybody knows how fun a Santiago Ponzinibbio fight is. Win, lose, or draw, you know he is a very high-level striker. He can eat big shots to give big shots, and that's what results in fun fights. For Michel Pereira, we all know how crazy he is, but it's okay. Where does crazy get you in the rankings? Does it just make you a fun fighter? Can it actually crack you into the top 15? And I think this matchup against Ponzinibbio is maybe not extremely favorable for Pereira, because it's not an easy night out fighting Ponzinibbio at all, but this is definitely a good introduction for Pereira to get into the top 15.
We got Rory Fitzpatrick over in the comments section. Love the show. Also, shout out PEI, Rory Fitzpatrick. I will be over there next weekend shooting the golf balls. Donald D. Guys hitting up that chat. Hello from Vegas, my brothers. Can't wait for this fight. I know you can't. I know who your pick is in this one, and I believe it's the man on the right-hand side of the screen. And the second pick, Matt, Chitty Bang Bang and Joe Kwani, Dusko Todorovic. There were a couple people out there in the comment section this week saying, guys, don't forget about what Dusko did to Michel Pereira. And my response to that in the comment section was, hey, don't forget the time Stefan Struve knocked out Stipe Miocic. Things happen in MMA. Could Dusko hit him with the touch of death? Hit him with a little bit of that wrestling? He certainly could. It would surprise the bejesus out of me. The bejesus.
Is that the handoff?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't see Dusko beating Chitty at all.
I'm gonna disagree a little bit on that. I do think you're short-selling him by comparing him to Stefan Struve fighting Stipe. I thought Dusko looked really good in that Michel Pereira fight, to be completely honest. Like, yes, he got hit by some big shots, but his overall aggression in that fight hasn't necessarily been something that we've seen to full effect in the UFC. And against a guy like Chitty and Joe Kwani, you can't just stand at range and strike with him, because I think we all know what's gonna happen if you do end up having that as a game plan. You're gonna get lit up at range, and you're probably gonna get knocked out. But I do think if Dusko has that aggressive mindset in this fight, will it get him the win? I'm not saying that at all. It's going to make this a fight of the night, though, and I think it will be a phenomenal matchup between these two guys.
All right, Matt, so we will move on and move back to that full card view. As you folks know, with Fight Night Picks with question mark kicks, we get that last second opportunity to kind of go through some of these picks. No weight misses this week. Everybody looked good on the scale. Everybody looked good facing off as well. I mean, yesterday, Maki Pitolo, I'm a professional fighter, not a professional weight cutter. Hey, Maki! Make the weight, but the guy he was fighting was 189 pounds for 185, so it doesn't matter. It's like, whose line is it anyways? It could happen. 21 hanging out. Got to get my Fight Night Picks fixed. I appreciate that. And going back to the callback to the last fight, Kicks Good saying this fight isn't going to decision. Chitty is going to maul him. We will see what happens. But Matt, as it stands, this is a very interesting card. And I know we had a lot to say about the first fight on the prelims. Elise Reed taking on Sam Hughes. And listen, very, very evident what these two fighters are going to do. Now, Sam Hughes will like to box and stand right in front of her opponent for about the first round. We'll see how that goes with the second camp under the wing of Saif Saud, who likes to yell expletives at his fighters. Now, I said a lot of nasty things at the start of the week. I did a quotable, a Saif Saud quotable. And I'm not going to say it now, but what I will say is that Sam Hughes, as that fight went on, her last time out, wrestled some more against Estela Nunes, whose ground game is as good as mine. It's as good as mine. You're going to get held down by Sam Hughes. Now, when you do look at Elise Reed, she is good at having a first move off of defending the takedown. She's a career-long Taekwondo black belt. She's second-degree black belt in Taekwondo. Owns her own gym that she fights out of, so that's pretty cool to see. But she's faced quite a few wrestlers in the past, beating them. Jasmine Jasdavizi is one of them, who's giant and a Canadian, Commonwealth wrestler, or not Commonwealth, but she was a Canadian national wrestler. So when I do look at this fight, Matt, it is very much contrast of styles.
And I like what you brought up, too, about how both fighters recently have fought similar opponents. It's not like they're just getting ready for a wrestler, just getting ready for a striker, and it's not something that they've seen in the past. Because for Elise Reed, she's seen the, okay, I have to be smart with my striking, defend a few takedowns early, and if the fight gets late, probably rely on my movement. She's been able to do that before, and against Sam Hughes, it will be interesting. Do you think we'll ever see the evolution in Sam Hughes' striking? Because a lot of it is, how do I get close close to my opponent? How do I get close to my opponent? How do I make them work? Because that's the thing we always talk about, and I know people are going to roll their eyes right now. How good is Sam Hughes' cardio?
Yeah, it's legendary.
It is really high level. And I know how we talk about people coming over from other sports and, are those skills necessarily applicable to MMA? Well, no, in a lot of cases they're not. But if you have phenomenal cardio from track and field, that does help you in MMA, which is a very cardio-reliant sport. So I do think there is a world where Sam Hughes can weaponize her pace, get on top, and use some of that wrestling that we saw in the Estela Nunes fight. But the problem is, beating Estela Nunes doesn't mean that, okay, now you could just go out there and use that game plan against any other pure striker. It might work again, because again, Elise Reed and Estela Nunes, at least on the feet, are sort of similar. I do agree with you, though. I do think Elise Reed is going to offer much more resistance from the takedown. I do think she'll be able to keep this fight on the feet.
Well, this is one of those ones, I mean, we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total vote. 65% Reed to 35% with Sam Hughes. That's on our Instagram story over there at Fight Night picks. Easy stuff to find. Elise Reed, slight favorite, open minus 150, was all the way down to minus 175, minus 153 right now live line. Sam Hughes at a plus 128. This is one of those ones I'd stay away from. I think it's going to go to decision either way. Wouldn't surprise me if it went away from that. I mean, let's bring up that just so we can have the conversation. Yeah, fight goes the distance, minus 325. Good call, Craig. Good call. But Branch Above hanging out over in that comment section. Kyle saying Elise Reed can knock girls out too. Kyle, I mean, she knocked out Dirty Movie star at one point, but Rebecca Brigman.
I do agree with Kyle, though. Elise Reed's definitely the one who's going to be doing the more damage in this fight, and I think that's going to be key. If she can hit Sam Hughes early and really just make her pay for some of those entries in the early going of this fight, you're probably going to see a more hesitant Sam Hughes, and if she's not really going out there getting after her takedown attempts, I don't really think she can be able to make up the difference on the feet.
Yeah, to me, I think Elise Reed's going to be able to get it done with the striking. I do like the advancements in Sam Hughes' game, and again, MMA King saying, Reed lost that Jasmine fight, LOL. Okay, Reed might have lost the Jasmine fight. Reed definitely beat Corey McKenna, but that was a split decision, and one of the judges scored all 3 rounds for McKenna. If you look at it for Sam Hughes, the weird fighter last time out, the eye pokes, the point lost. There's a lot of different things that we could say about some of those judges' decisions, but we'll move on, Matt, to our next fight. We have Chase Hooper, Felipe Colares. Now, out of any of the fights on this card, I threw this one up, and you can vote for it here on the stream, and 59% of you have Chase Hooper, 41% Felipe Colares. Am I a Felipe Colares believer? Not necessarily, but I will say this, Matt. I don't know where the Chase Hooper fans came from, but they showed up to show out this week, and holy smokes, did they fill up the comment section. This guy's made leaps and bounds gains in his game. I can't wait to see Chase Hooper. His striking's so much better. He's so much improved on the ground. I was sold that bill of goods last fight, and Steven Peterson 30-27.
This is what I compare it to. You sound like when my buddy Colby describes Peyton Pritchard coming off the bench for the Boston Celtics to me. He's like, he bangs threes, he defends, he playmakes, and then I'll watch the Celtics, and I'm like, does he though? I think you're caught up in some of the extras right now. I agree. Chase Hooper could show up today and look like a far different fighter. He could. He is very young. He's with a newer gym that's going to have a very long time with him to really refine some of his technique on the feet. But my problem is, if he looks like the fighter he showed up as last time out, it's going to be a tough matchup for him. Like, Chase Hooper does not have much going for him on the feet. And against Felipe Colares, who isn't the best of grapplers, and yes, Chase Hooper is going to have a window if he is able to get this fight to the mat, I just think Colares has much faster hands, and he will be able to damage Chase Hooper constantly, because Hooper's been hurt in pretty much every single one of his fights in the UFC. And again, I keep on bringing this up. I think it was a disservice to bring him into the UFC this early in his career. If he was able to just develop a little bit more in the regional scene, pick up some more wins, see some different looks of different fighters, I think he'd have a lot more success if he was signed in when he was 25, 26 years old, and he did have time to progress a little bit more.
And again, we just had this conversation, Elise Reed, Corey McKenna, Jazz DeVizius, Elise Reed, as far as judge decisions are concerned, Felipe Colares got beat in, whether it was all 3 rounds or 2 of the 3 rounds against Chris Gutierrez, the fight wasn't even close. Somehow one of the judges gave him the nod, so it ends up split decision his last time out. But he definitely didn't win that fight. Colares, definitely the more polished striker out of these two guys. He will depend on the takedown in some of his fights, which is definitely scary against Hooper. And yes, Colares moving up his last few fights down at 135. He's a former Jungle Fights champ at featherweight. But again, I saw it from Clay over there in the comments section saying, I'll believe it when I see it, out of Chase Hooper. If Chase Hooper looks great this weekend, maybe then I'll be on the train.
And this is my question for you, I guess, just with Chase Hooper. He went to a striking-based gym. Do you think it would have been more beneficial for him to maybe go to a Team Alpha Male, go to an Extreme Couture, something to work maybe more his wrestling to help get the fight to his biggest strength?
No, I mean, to me, Chase Hooper is like a Mickey Gall. It's all fun. He's got a grappling base. And remember, Mickey Gall did that thing where he went out to California, worked with Stitch 'em Up Joe Schilling, and the striking progressed a little bit only later on in his career when he went to train with Matt Brown. It's one of those ones.
But no, that's what I'm asking. Do you think Chase Hooper would have benefited more from a wrestling-centric camp and not a striking one?
Probably would, but yeah, again, to me, I gotta see it out of Chase Hooper. He's the underdog in this fight. They opened at par, plus 161 on Hooper. Colares, minus 192. Scary stuff, but again, 59% of the fans here, Matt, going with Chase Hooper to get the win. I'd love to see the improvements. MPTV's kid turned 2, so happy birthday to her. But yeah, I've got Felipe Colares here.
I do too, but I don't like the odds whatsoever on this fight. Again, he is fighting a guy who's much bigger than him, and I do think there is a window where Hooper's able to get this to the mat, and he could look really good, but again, I do think the striking of Felipe is going to be enough of an X factor for him to win this one.
23 break, having a good time over in that comment section. Matt, we have our next fight. This is a good one. Jonathan Martinez, Vince Morales. And for Vince Morales, he was able to shoot the lights out his last time out. He was able to go out there and look like a true primetime performer against Louis Smolka, landing that big-time shot that dropped him, finished it up with a couple of nice shots. Vince Morales has a deceiving record in the UFC because that Benito Lopez loss, you look at numbers on a page, and it's like, wow, Vince Morales won that fight. You go back and watch that fight, it's like, wow, Vince Morales won that fight. And then you look at the judges' scorecards and you go, what the hell kind of a fight were they watching? Was it like something on their phone? Not the same one, but when Morales shows up, good wrestling, good counter wrestling, and he's coming into his own in terms of his striking. That's a tough ask when you're taking on a guy like Jonathan Martinez. However, Martinez's defensive wrestling, not very good. Vince Morales, quite good in that respect, but Martinez is a better striker than Morales. I think this is going to be so much fun. Danny Mora over there saying, Jonathan Martinez, absolute Ghostface killer? We'll see what happens, but I do like this fight, man.
Jonathan Martinez is never in a boring fight, so at least this should be a fun fight no matter what the result is. I do agree with you. Vince Morales, his hands have progressed, but when you do think of a Vince Morales fight, he's going to be going for takedowns. He is oddly athletic for how big he is, like a very, very strong guy if he is able to get in on your hips. So I do expect him to finish a lot of his takedowns if he is able to get on the inside of Jonathan Martinez. I look at this fight, though, very similar to the fight that Justin James had against Gabriel Benitez. And I know they're different fighters, they're different styles, but again, you have a wrestle boxer fighting a more pure striker who can grapple a little bit off their back or at least be sound defensively. And I think Jonathan Martinez can do that. And the other thing, too, is Martinez can make guys pay for coming up the middle a lot. Now, he struggles with his boxing defense sometimes with the hands because he does hold his hands just sort of stationary and relies on his just hands to block the punches, not his head movement. But the problem is, Morales is going to be all the way out or all the way in with his own boxing because he's not much of a kicker. And if he stays at kicking range with Jonathan Martinez, he'll be limping the whole way back. Like after the judges' scorecards are read or if it's a finish, whatever the result is, he will be on crutches for a week. That's how good of a kicker Jonathan Martinez is. And that's what I do think the X factor of this fight is. Martinez can make Morales pay when he's in the middle of the cage, whereas Morales has to get on the inside to do a lot of his damage.
He's going to look like Shane Burgos will when he fights Charles Down. What a fight. Wow. I'm excited about that one. Somebody had said up there in the comments section that both these guys missed weight. No, they didn't. They did not. So I do look at this fight as one of the more fun ones on the card. It's kind of a shame. This is like the alternate to the fight of the night screen. If we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes, 80% Martinez to 20% Morales. I think this is going to be an awesome fight. And again, Martinez in his last fight, hands down, up against the cage, kind of turning away. Turbo Perez, see you later, dropped him, and somehow Martinez still able to win all of the rounds in that fight, depending on how he scored the first. But if we do look at the odds for this one, Matt, as about 400 tune in, we need some of those likes. They're not there yet. Martinez open to minus 150, minus 252 right now. For Vince Morales, open to plus 130, at a plus 205. So for me, I've got Jonathan Martinez. I love the kicks. I love the combinations that he's able to throw with. And once he's able to pour it on and move forward, he is a special fighter. Vince Morales, one of those guys that strikes right down the middle. Martinez tends to struggle with guys that throw check hooks. I don't think Morales is one of those guys. We'll see if it happens tonight. But again, I really do like this fight. I think it's going to be one of the better ones on the card.
It should be. And again, for Martinez, I worry about his boxing defense a little bit. But at kickboxing range, he's a much better pure striker than Vince Morales. And Morales is going to have to get close to damage him. And again, if you do get close to him, Davey Grant was able to have success when he was able to move forward with his hooks. I don't expect Morales to be able to do the same.
Should be a fun one. And we'll move on to the next fight on this card. It's another Morales. It's Omar. Looks great at 155 again. I thought he looked great on the scale. He looked great standing in there against Uros Medic. And when we consider these two guys, Medic is a guy that has experience at middleweight, quite a bit at welterweight in terms of a young MMA career, and at 155 here and now. Now, he took on a much bigger fighter as Sean Glenn hits out the super chat.
Someone who gets excited for Jonathan Martinez.
More Martinez! Let's get into it. He put it in all caps, so I have to shout it. But when I do look at this fight, Matt, for Uros Medic, he took on another really big guy in the division in Jailton Turner, who is going to fight Brad Riddell, so that's a lot of fun.
That's going to be a wild fight.
And it shows how much the promotion likes and looks into a guy like Jailton Turner, who 3-4 fights ago, deceiving record, because there's some losses there, but Jailton Turner is a very, very special fighter. So for Medic, he either comes out this weekend and looks like a man on fire, or he looks like a man at the bottom of the ocean. Which will it be?
This fight really does come down to how much do you value that Jailton Turner loss in the overall career of Uros Medic, because there's two ways to look at his career. He's either a spectacular fighter who fought a lot of guys he was way better than on the regional scene, and then came up against another very talented fighter in the UFC, which has happened before, or he may have been a bit of a hype job who finally ran into a really good fighter. Okay, we all agree with that statement, or at least some of that statement. That really is what this fight comes down to, because Omar Morales, I'll be honest, it's hard to really get a read on him because his fights are never all that one-sided towards him. He'll fight a very defensively sound fight. The volume won't be all that high. He'll win rounds, but it's never something that you watch and you're like, wow, it's like a Max Holloway beatdown on a Calvin Kattar or something. He's being very smart with his fighting technique, and he is able to sustain it for, 14, 15 hard minutes, and that's what I do think this fight's going to come down to. Uros Medic comes with a big storm early on in all of his fights, but if Omar can weather that early storm, which is, again, that's a big storm to weather, I do think he'll be looking really good in that second and third round, but the size discrepancy is pretty big in this fight, and I wasn't all that surprised to see them face off and see Medic look that much bigger, but again, it does worry me a little bit. I still have Omar in this fight, but the size and the explosiveness of Medic does worry me.
Yeah, when you do look at Omar Morales, this guy 36, almost 37 years old, moving back up to 155 where he had all of his success. He was able to get the win over Harvey Park, a really good regional scene fighter back in 2019 to punch his ticket in the UFC. Beats Dunhan Ma. See you later. You're out of the UFC. Beats Gabriel Benitez by decision. Loses to Giga Chikadze, where he didn't even get started in that fight. It was just all Giga rolling. He beat Shane Young, utilized his wrestling, did Morales, and then he lost to JSP. Jonathan Pierce, who has a big-time fight that was just announced as well. Like, I feel like I'm on this train of, hey, these guys just got big-time fights. But for Omar Morales, good wrestling. I'm interested to see if he brings it into play with Medic, because that's an area that I think a bigger guy like Medic, who's well-schooled against the lower-rung Alaska FC guys, like, there's 3 different organizations that I look at and I go, wow, huge grain of salt, big red flag. Alaska FC is one of them. WLF Wars is another one, and WWFC over in Eastern Europe is the third, and Island Fights, I guess. But for me,
there's more than just 3. But
there's very padded records that come out of those 3 promotions, more so than any other regional scene in this world. And there's a big-time fighter coming up in the not-so-distant future coming from WWFC. But when I do look at this fight, I like the size out of Medic. I look at the odds for this one as I drop my phone, so now I can't see the votes. But Matt, Omar Morales is the favorite in this matchup. Open to -150, -144 right now for Medic. Coming in at a plus a 120. And over there in the comments section, VT saying, how the heck do we get 440 viewers and only 90 likes? Come on, boys. Oh, listen, VT's doing it for the team. Doing it for the team. For the team. I'm going to pick my phone up. Do you have anything else to say about this fight?
For Omar, I think you're going to fight Uros Medic like you got to play Chris Paul in the playoffs. Just make him work no matter what. It might not look good at every single moment, but the more you make him work, the easier it's going to get the longer the fight goes. So I could see Medic having some big moments early, but I'm going to stick with the Omar pick just because I think he can sustain his offense for 15 minutes, whereas Medic might look really good in some moments. I just don't think it's a sustainable way to fight.
51% of the fans on our Instagram have Morales to get the win, 49% on Medic. So we're split on the pick, but I really do like this fight, Matt. And then we move into...
And Zamora, you're right. I have no idea who wins this fight because the size of Medic does worry me quite a bit.
Oh, my favorite thing, I gotta say this, my favorite thing that happened this week in the comments section was we start our video off and we say, hey, we had a bad week last week. We both went 5-6. We admit it. And then people go, but you're not supposed to do that. You guys are experts. You need to change things. What are we doing here, folks? You can have a bad week.
I like it too how people are just like, you guaranteed this person was going to win. Here's the thing. I'm never 100% sold on every single prediction. You know, you have a pretty good feeling about a lot of them, but you never think, okay, 100% of the time Jailton Almeida is going to beat Parker Porter. There's definitely a world out there, maybe even worlds, where Parker Porter's able to get a win.
No, it's just funny. But when we go into this week, Jailton Almeida, now Matt, we said at the start of the week, I anticipate he's going to come in between, 220 and 230. And son of a gun, he comes in at 224, so... Let's see. I mean, I thought he looked good on the scale, obviously, because he's just got a little bit more muscle and a little bit more water weight. Parker Porter came in 2 pounds heavier than his last time out, right on the line, 265. So he is no, I guess, Greg Hardy. He's no Justin Tabatha. Like, we're not hitting 266, and we're not missing weight.
But he is, though. That's the thing about Parker Porter. He's definitely cutting weight to make the heavyweight limit.
No, that much is true. So, for Parker Porter, cutting the weight, Jose Ramirez... Big homer last night, Jose Ramirez, from that left side of the plate.
I love Jose Ramirez.
Big super chat there. So
faster than you would think, too.
That much is appreciated. But again, when I do look at this fight, Matt, Parker Porter, big guy at heavyweight. Old school throwback guy. Now, he lost to Chris Daukaus, short notice fight, what have you. 3-fight win streak where he's looked good. And we've talked about that. I like this Parker Porter that we've seen in his last 3 fights. I don't have him to win this one. But I do like what I've seen out of Porter. Good gas tank at heavyweight. Always pours the pressure on. Like, when I consider Parker Porter next to the Mountain, Jared Vanderaa, Parker Porter doesn't stop. Like, he just continues to motor forward, whereas Vanderaa might huff and puff and try and blow the house down. Against Jailton Almeida, we'll see how his gas tank holds up. But the thing that people are forgetting, Almeida fought scrubs on the regional scene. But he has 2 fights at heavyweight in the past. Like, he has fought at heavyweight. So it's not something that's totally eluded him. So again, for me, I do have Almeida here. But again, the odds are what? Like, -4? Nope, they're even more. -590 Almeida. And if you like Parker Porter, we're talking +426.
Jailton Almeida is better at pretty much everything. Like, skill-wise, Jailton Almeida is a far more skilled athlete in this fight. But again, like you said with Parker Porter, he might look like you would think a heavyweight named Parker Porter would look like. Doesn't necessarily fight in that manner, though. You would think he goes out there, throws big power shots, and that's about it. But he will fight in a more intelligent manner than that. He will go for takedowns. He will use his gas tank and throw quite a bit of volume at this weight class. And I think that's going to be important, too, because for Porter to have success, you gotta make the smaller guy feel your physicality. You gotta wear on him throughout this fight, because if you just let Jailton Almeida stand at kicking range, or even stand at that weird range where you go for those strange body lock takedowns, because that's going to be the key. If Almeida gets on top of Parker Porter for 40 seconds, that might even be generous. The fight's going to be over. He's that much better of a grappler.
I mean, Jailton could go Kimura. He could go key lock. He could go with anything
he could do
wants.
like the Dagestani handcuff and just ground him out on the ground. Like, that's how good of a fighter Jailton Almeida is. And he's not a guy who will only go for ground and pound or submissions. He can go for either avenue, and he will use one to open up the other one. So for Porter, I think if he can keep this fight on the feet, use a lot of clinch work, then maybe he will be able to... It's going to be weird. He might not win the fight, but he won't lose the fight that way. He'll be able to stifle some of the offense of Jailton Almeida, but I do think that if Almeida gets this fight to the ground even one time, it's pretty much a wrap.
82% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Jailton Maladinho Almeida Jr. to get the win over Parker Porter, but again... If Almeida can't get it done in the first round, I know he calls himself Brazilian Habib, but I don't know. After the first round, maybe you want to go live with Porter. I feel like a lot of people would do that.
This is a tough fight for Parker Porter. It is really an uphill battle. I think Miley Cyrus once sang a song about that.
Yeah.
The climb. For Parker Porter, though, unless he is able to get a lot of clinch work done, I just don't really see how he's going to be able to get a lot of sustained offense throughout this fight. On the feet, he has good volume, but again, it's nothing that he can really commit to all that much. Because let's say he does sit down on a power shot and Almeida decides, okay, I'm going to read this and I'm going to get it on his hips. It's pretty much a wrap for Parker Porter at that time. So I just think in the back of his mind, he's always going to be worried about throwing too hard because he's going to have to focus so much on his takedown defense.
Yeah, and don't forget, too, this was originally a fight to be at 205 pounds. Obviously not with Parker Porter, but it was supposed to be Max Grecian, Jailton, Almeida. The fight was announced about a month ago. So a little bit of an abbreviated camp for Porter taking the fight. For Almeida, he was getting ready for Grecian, who doesn't really fight like Parker Porter does. But Matt, we'll move on to our next fight. This is a sketch bag. Alen Amedovski in the UFC's 0-2. His last fight was in, 2019? His last win was in 2018 when he was starching guys with Bellator. And Joseph Holmes has beaten all-right regional scene fighters, and he's won in impressive fashion, but his cardio leaves more to be desired, and he's a ground fighter who doesn't really have the wrestling, and he's a striker, but he's longer than everybody else in the division and taller, but he likes to strike in close boxing proximity. So, could Joseph Holmes lose? Yeah. Could Alen Amedovski lose? 100%. Like, this is a ridiculous fight, and this is the featured prelim. Way to go. Way to go, bearded Sean Shelby. Doesn't that look weird on him?
I don't care. Sean Shelby, weird. Do whatever you want, buddy. For Joseph Holmes, I don't like his regional scene fights very much, like at all. And the thing is, you might look at some of the Tapology pages and say, hey, he beat guys with positive records. Please go back and watch some of those fights. The level of competition is not there whatsoever. And the guys who he's fighting, not that they just give up, but they just sort of kind of give up in some cases. And I worry about Joseph Holmes at the UFC level. Could he beat Alen Amedovski? Of course. But the way you set up Amedovski doesn't necessarily mean he's beating someone on the cusp of the top 15. I picked Amedovski because I think offensively his striking is quite a bit better than Joseph Holmes. But I do think there's a world where Holmes is able to get him up against the cage, wear him down a little bit, use his cardio, use his physicality, and maybe get this fight to the mat later on. I just think Amedovski's going to be able to damage Holmes, especially early on in this fight. And he might be able to make Holmes fight as a lesser version of himself as it goes on. But neither guys look good in the UFC whatsoever.
Well, I mean, Joseph Holmes did in his first round against Jamie Pickett, and then he lost the second and the third.
Jamie Pickett's not like a world beater by any means.
Better than Alen Amedovski. I do have Holmes in this one, but again, it's a flip of a coin between a couple of guys that have underwhelmed. If you like the price on Joseph Holmes at a minus 210, 200, somewhere
I'll take
around
the
there.
underdog for plus 180 in this.
Yeah, you got plus 172 on Alen Amedovski. If you have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one, 69%. On Holmes, 31% Amedovski, and over there in the comments section, Esteban saying that reach advantage by Holmes. He doesn't use it, Esteban. And Professor Chris, which guy has better cardio here? Amedovski's a first-round fighter, and Joseph Holmes is a finisher as well. So for Amedovski, the last time that he made it out of the first round was in 2018 against debuting Butter Mamdou.
The Jocko fight went 3 rounds.
The Jocko fight, I guess, yeah. I was thinking more a fight that he won. The Jocko fight, though, he landed no strikes in the third round, and Jocko landed about 50. So it is a spicy meatball, Matt. And then we go to another fight at middleweight. We have Eryk Anders, ya boy, taking on Jin Young Park. And I feel like people can get behind this type of fight. You know, I mean, both guys strike in their own way, and both guys grapple in their own way. And usually it's exciting. Even if it's a no contest for Eryk Anders and there's an illegal knee, even if there was intent there, which should be a disqualification because you meant to throw the knee, but they call it a no contest anyway. It's water under the bridge, water wins and losses. But for Jin Young Park's last time out, 2-round fight of the night, he was teeing off against Gregory Rodriguez, and then Gregory went sicko mode and teed off on him.
Is Eryk Anders like Chandler Parsons? Lot of hype. Just never really worked out. And I know Chandler Parsons had a lot of injuries, getting into a terrible
that's where I was going.
car accident. But the good news is Chandler Parsons has invested very well, and I think he's doing extremely well for himself. It's just with Eryk Anders, it's kind of wild. You talk about it. He's had 2 main events in the UFC. Isn't
One
that
against
wild?
a former champ.
Both in Brazil, oddly enough. But it's wild the level of promotion that Eryk Anders has got throughout his career. And he's a good fighter, don't get me wrong. But he doesn't really stand out in any one aspect. He has a powerful left hand. He throws a lot of single shots. He'll throw some leg kicks, but he's not that big of a kicker. And his defense isn't all that great. He is susceptible to getting hit and by power shots too. And that's why this fight against Jin Young Park should be so interesting. Because Park on the inside, I think, can have a lot of success with his own boxing, But at range, Eryk Anders has kind of weird power. It's like he strikes like a much bigger version of Conor McGregor, minus the kicks and the jab and most of the other technique. He does really like that single left hand though, and it is something he goes back to quite a bit. It has a lot of power on it, but the memory I always have in my head about Eryk Anders is his biggest strength, which is his power and his sort of weird gas tank, because he doesn't fall off a cliff with his gas tank. He just doesn't throw an awful lot, so it's kind of hard to get tired when you're not throwing hundreds of strikes in fights. It's the Elias Theodoro fight. Elias didn't necessarily win that fight. He just threw so much volume that Eryk Anders could never really make up the difference, and that's what I worry about really in any Eryk Anders fight.
When I look at both of these guys, there's a guy that fought last night and looked like again, you talk man on fire. It was Aldierte Sanchez. Like, I consider these guys all kind of in that same category. They can strike, they can wrestle. When it comes down to the end of the day, it's usually a fun fight. But you look at both these guys, for Anders, usually tries to go out there for those power shots. And I listened to the Protect Your Neck podcast this week with Dan Tom, and he talked a lot about Eryk Anders. And the people that are always kind of going, yeah, but he trains out of Fight Ready. Like, he trains at Fight Ready. But Dan kind of mentioned, well, okay, well, if he trains at Fight Ready, what big improvements have we seen out of his game since he's gone from training in Alabama to training at Fight Ready? Not much. I mean, he's won some more fights, but we haven't seen any wholesale changes out of Eryk Anders. For Jun Young Park, better boxing combinations for sure, better volume. When Park's the better wrestler, he wrestles and he wins his fights. That's what we've seen in the UFC. When he's a worse wrestler, he gets taken down and he loses his fights. The two losses he's had against Anthony Hernandez, old Fluffy, and even Gregory Rodriguez with those like judo hip tosses, like those are a little different. But Hernandez, when he wrestles, it's typical American wrestling. He's going double leg or freestyle. He's going single leg. So Anders can go for those. But I mean, for me, I just have Park as a slightly steadier fighter, and that's why I like him in this one.
Park has a huge hole in his game, though, and I agree with you. I'm going to pick Junior Park, but he does have a massive hole in his game. If you throw power shots in like 2 or 3 set combinations, sign the contract as fast as you can if you're fighting him, because that is his weakness. He will stand in the pocket and he will prioritize his own offense a little bit more than his defense. And if you are a heavy-handed striker yourself, you'll be able to get to him as the fight goes on. The Gregory Rodriguez fight is a great example of that, but it does come up in some of his other fights. He doesn't always get knocked out, rocked as a result of it, but you do notice it. He is willing to stand in the pocket, maybe that half a second too long. So I do think a big punch from Anders might be able to rock him, but I do like the steady nature of Park.
561 tuning in right now for Fight Night Holm versus Vieira. We certainly appreciate you folks showing up, and we would certainly appreciate a like on the video, because 55% of you on the Instagrams have Anders to win this fight, 45% going with Jun Young Park. So I guess we're going against the grain. We'll have a look at the odds, because honestly I can't remember who's favored to win this one. It is Jun Young Park, open to power, minus 206, and for Eryk Anders, plus 169. So, decent opportunity, I guess, for the underdog, Eryk Anders. I mean, I didn't think it was that big of a split. Could not remember. The Dentist saying, shout out from Sweden. You guys do the best previews. You know, if you're from Sweden, my favorite hockey player of all time from Sweden, Peter Forsberg.
I'd love to go to Sweden. I can't think of a single basketball player from Sweden.
Nicholas Lidstrom, another great from Sweden. We'll move into our next fight, Matt. Controversial out there in the streets is Polyana Viana and Tabatha Ricci. Now, I know a lot of the conversation isn't necessarily focused around their fight styles. We don't go for the extracurriculars here, although Polyana Viana's chest tattoo is scary, and I bet it would hurt a lot. It would hurt. But Polyana Viana coming into this one is at a big advantage, having won these fights by finish that she has on this UFC record. I mean, remember the time when she fought Hannah Cifers and got knocked down? It seems like forever ago, but that's a real thing that actually happened in MMA. And for Tabatha Ricci, they said, hey, you want to come into the UFC? Here's Manov Fiorot, future title challenger. You want to fight her at 125? Do it. Don't. We'll sign your check. And she did it. She lost. And then she came out her last time out against Maria Oliveira, and it was like, Fiorot's here, and Oliveira's way down in the basement, and she got the win over Oliveira, somebody who, I mean, fought Marina Rodriguez and struggled in that fight, but that stuff kind of happened. So we come into this fight where Viana, much longer, much taller, much bigger, you assume. You've got Tabatha Ricci, judo black belt, jiu-jitsu black belt, but Polyana Viana's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. And when it comes down to Tabatha Ricci, Muay Thai title championship from Brazil in her back pocket, but I won't look too much into that one. All I have to say in this one, Matt, is stack up skills on a page. Tabatha Ricci is way above Polyana Viana, but when you look at a fight like this, it's lower level women's strawweights and it's MMA. So those titles and those accolades don't necessarily matter all that much.
That's the key term, lower level. This isn't going to be fight of the night, guys. I'm really sorry. For Polyana Viana, it really depends on what night you catch her, though. Because, like, if you watch her sometimes, you're like, wow, the striking looks kind of okay, even though it's stiff. That's a good ground game. I like some transitions off of her back into offensive positions. And then you kind of focus on all the others. And there is a lot of holes in her game. She doesn't have great striking volume. She is hittable. If you're a power puncher, you can get on the inside of her strikes and really make her pay for it. But against Ricci, you don't really think some of those holes are going to be there. And I like how you described it too for Ricci. This is one of those ceiling and basement fights where we're just going to learn a lot more about her in this matchup no matter what. Because when you fight someone like Vieira, who honestly it seems like they're building her towards a title shot right now. Like she's probably, one, maybe 2 fights away from fighting Valentina. So losing to her does not mean anything to me.
Or Taila Santos.
Or Taila Santos. And again, Taila Santos is an extremely talented fighter in her own right. I do worry a little bit about the range of Polyana in this fight, and I do think it could give Ricci quite a bit of issues early on, because she will throw some of those awkward front kicks up the middle, and they're not the most damaging shots, but they at least keep Ricci away from her, and I think that's going to be the real key. If Viana could just stand at a really long range, what's Ricci going to do to get to her unless she does just explode in from the outside for takedowns? Now, I believe that's what she's going to do, and I do have her to win this fight, but I do think there's a world where Polyana just stays big and uses her reach and her movement.
Yeah, Sean V bringing up the Viana video of the mugger, and when you look at Polyana Viana on the socials, it's much less about MMA and more about the Instagram. But when I do look at it, Matt, I'm Malone Hart, I'll hit you up. Sending my regards from Disney World in Orlando. Do work, fellas. I'm pretty sure Malone Hart could correct me on this, so we'll go on a tangent because that's a giant super chat, and it's much appreciated. I did see today when I was watching MLB Network, Bennett Charles hitting up the super chat. Let's get that like count up, boys. But back to Malone Hart. Sorry, Bennett Charles. I appreciate the super chat. I think they said on MLB Network in an ad that there's going to be a new, what is it, like an Avengers or Guardians of the Galaxy ride at Disney World in Orlando. I think it was Orlando and not California, but...
I'm having a great time, Malone Hart.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Disney World, let's get into it. Great time in Florida. That was my last vacation anywhere, man.
Maybe Aaron Rodgers is there. I know he's big into Disney World. Weird guy.
Big Disney World guy. So, in this fight, Matt, Polyana Viana has the length, has the jiu-jitsu. She went for 5 different submissions in, who was it? Against, why is her name? 2 M's. Her name's escaping
Mallory
me.
Martin.
Mallory Martin.
This is my problem, though. If you go for 5 different submissions on Mallory Martin and you're not able to complete a single one of them...
No, she got 1.
I know she got 1, but it took her 5... Well, it took her 4 until she got the last one. Mallory Martin's not a high-level grappler at all. And I do worry that if Viana does find herself in some of those elongated transitions where both fighters are scrambling quite a bit, I do think Ricci definitely has the edge with those scrambles.
Yeah, Ricci in her striking, she puts her head down and she throws power punches like Jorgen De Castro did last night. And listen, they could land. She's doing something. She's advancing. So again, for me, I have Ricci in this one, but it's sketchy. We move on to our next fight, Matt. Chitty Bang Bang and Joe Kwani, Dusko Todorovic, Matt. One of those fights at middleweight, again, where is it going to be a finish? I think it will be. Both guys power punchers. Dusko has that Serbian national wrestling pedigree in his back pocket. When he uses it, he looks very good. We've seen that in the UFC against one Dequan Townsend, a guy who's won some fights outside of the UFC since being with the promotion. But for Dusko, it's been a mixed bag. He's been finished in fights. He looked good against Maki Pitolo. Maki Pitolo looked good last night. And retired Doug Ursher, baby. So a good win for him last night. 187.5 to 189 at middleweight. Boys showing up. But in this fight, Matt, Dusko, Chitty Bang Bang. Chitty has a little bit of grappling in his back pocket. Not necessarily the wrestling, but his jiu-jitsu in his back pocket. Brother Anthony and Joe Kwani, noted striker. I love this fight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But what are we saying here?
I worry about Chitty Joe Kwani the second he does fight a primary wrestler. That's kind of the weird thing about him. I think he got... I don't want to say lucky, but let's call it like it was. He got the best result possible against Marc-Andre Barriault in that fight, because if that fight does go later, if that goes into the second, third round, we probably do see a lot more wrestling out of Barriault, and it might not get him the win, but it's a much harder fight for Chitty, at least stylistically, with the way Chitty likes to fight, and that's what I think is a little weird about this matchmaking. I'm excited for this matchup against Dusko, because Dusko's not afraid to get hit to give a hit, and that's what's going to make this fight so much fun. But is that really a style you want to have when you're fighting a guy like Chitty and Joe Kwani? Like, later on, Michelle Pereira is going to fight Santiago Ponzinibbio in the co-main event. Do you think Michelle's sitting around with his boys out back being like, hey, let's eat a couple shots before we give one of our own? Not at all, because you don't want to have that mindset when you're fighting someone like Santiago Ponzinibbio who could really make you pay for those lapses in just judgment. I do think the style of Dusko is a lot more catered towards a shitty win than even Marc-André Barriault was. And he beat him in, 40 seconds? It was under a minute. So I do think Dusko could make this a fun fight, but I do think his style is going to make it really tough just because he is so hittable.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it for Dusko, you consider the fights UFC and UFC adjacent. I know a lot of people like to talk about the fight against Michelle Pereira over with Serbian Battle Championship.
It's a fun fight to watch.
It is. I mean, he presses Michelle up against the cage where Michelle will do his Superman punches, his flying knees, and all that stuff, and then he just goes to work and ends up getting the win. But you look at it, I mean, he fights over on Dana White's Contender Series, decision win over Teddy Ash, tries to take him down umpteen different times, gets a none of them, fights Daquan Towns, gets one takedown, goes to work, fights Puna Soriano, loses, fights Gregory Rodriguez, gets taken down and beaten up, and then he fights Maki Pitolo, and he's able to get him out of there in the first round. Maki Pitolo of Tough Enough and Eagle FC Valor. So, Matt, for me, I do like Chidi Njokuani. No change there. 77% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Chidi, Bang Bang, Michael C. Williams guy. And if we have a look at the odds for this one, Chidi coming in at a minus, as Best Fight Odds does his best to load, 264 favorite, and Dusko at a plus 215. I have Chidi, Bang Bang. Chad, the UFC dad, asking for that O word. Chad, you don't do that here. We don't do that here.
This is the thing I'll say about Chidi. On his way up through the rankings, they're not going to make him fight Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori's the one guy who was made in a lab who probably keeps up Chidi at night.
Like, I know Bruno Silva just had a fight book, but, like, give me Bruno Silva, Chidi Njokuani, and just give me that!
Yeah, that would be a phenomenal matchup. Don't give him a primary wrestler, though. Let's have a little bit of fun, at least until he does stumble.
Yeah, that's the way to go. All right, Matt. So, our co-main event of the evening, and again,
so excited for this.
Michelle Pereira was wearing shoes, but son of a gun, it was like, why is he so big compared to Santiago Ponzinibbio? Like, is Ponzinibbio wearing it all in his thighs now? Like, where did it all go?
Big legs.
He did, well, he does, but I mean, you do look at this fight, Matt, and there's so many different things that we can point out stylistically, the differences between these two guys. I can spin a tale of Santiago Ponzinibbio winning this fight. I can do the same thing for Michelle Pereira, and I'm sure you can as well, but when it really comes down to it, Ponzinibbio, boxing combinations, Ponzinibbio, leg kicks, Michelle Pereira, wildness, Michelle Pereira, controlledness. Michelle Pereira's been working on his boxing. That's what makes this fight so interesting, and I love this one, so I can't wait to see what people are saying over there in the comments section. Danny Mora shouting to high heavens Michelle loses this one, and Bartholomew going with this is going to be a hell of a fight, because we can say whatever the hell we want here. But Matt, I really do think this is going to be a fun one. Chad, the UFC dad, saying I'm riding the younger fighter in this one. That's inappropriate. Joe is saying, how about Chidi versus the dude fighting Strickland? Yeah, that could be fun. And Santiago's 5'10", definitely not 6 feet. Guess what? I don't have a tape measure. But the next time I see Santiago Ponzinibbio, I'll bring one with me. Matt, we love this fight. What are we saying?
This is a phenomenal fight. It should be a really fun one. And I think the way that you describe Michelle Pereira does kind of perfectly encapsulate his style. It's all or kind of nothing at sometimes. So I think it will be interesting to see how he does gauge his style in this matchup with Ponzinibbio, because if he is just the wild man and tries to resort on winning via flying knee, he's going to miss a lot of those, get tired, and get knocked out. I think that's safe to say. But if he fights in the very reserved manner, the same thing could also happen. Ponzinibbio fights at just a really nice pace throughout his fights. He's not someone who's going to have these big peaks and valleys, and I think that's really key in this matchup, because Ponzinibbio, very good stylistically. He has great technique with really all of his kickboxing, even though he is somewhat hittable on the inside with his boxing. I just think technically Ponzinibbio is a little bit more refined than Michelle Pereira, but the key is, will Pereira be able to use sustained bursts to then win this fight? And I think that will be the key. If he's able to go out there, have a good 90 seconds in round one, maybe hurt Ponzinibbio, be defensively sound, almost fight like a Yoel Romero type of a game, then I do think Michelle could have a ton of success in this fight. I know that's a weird comparison because these guys don't fight in the same way at all, but you get the idea. Yoel Romero is either doing the craziest thing you've ever seen, or just having his hands up by his head, blocking punches, not doing much. I think if Pereira has that type of a game plan, he could have a lot of success against Ponzinibbio, but I do like just the overall output from Ponzinibbio. I do like the leg kicks. I liked how he ends things with that left hook. That was something Nico Price was able to land a little bit on Michelle at the end of their fight. And I think Ponzinibbio is a much higher level striker than Nico Price. So I do like Ponzinibbio, but this is a great fight.
I'm eager to see what Ponzinibbio looks like in that third round. Obviously, age is always the question. Hasn't been an issue. Wasn't an issue when he fought
knocked out Neil Magny in the fourth round.
His last time, and knocked out Neil Magny in the fourth round before he was away with the various injuries. But when I do look at this fight, I mean, you've got Santiago Ponzinibbio, lost that fight by split decision his last time out against Jeff Neal. Again, Craig's always on the wrong side of the decisions. I thought Santiago won it. Michel Pereira open to plus 130, minus 147 right now. Ponzinibbio open to minus 150, plus 124. So Michel Pereira, the third biggest mover and shaker, below Njokuani and Almeida. He is at a 47% clip. For me, I've got Michel Pereira. Again, those bursts, if he can sustain a couple of bursts around and make Ponzinibbio at least appear to be hurt or appear to be on the defensive, great way to win some time in the judge's eyes. If it's Dominic Cruz, you got to take him down and hold him down. Because that control time, that wins fights. Control time, only way to win the fight. But I like Pereira with those big-time blows, with those big-time bursts. So I will take him in this one. But again, I can spin you a story for both guys. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Austin Laxton over there in the comments section. I don't think Ponzinibbio is the same fighter as he used to be. Mike Ross, Holm by unanimous decision. And Starsmith 77 Porter saying Michelle by submission or TKO. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun one, Matt. And I'm really looking forward to it more than I am the main event, but I won't be a Debbie Downer too much. Holly Holmes taking on Ketlen Vieira. And for Holly Holmes, she's been away. She's had injuries, but she also had an injury before her last fight against Irene Aldana, and Holm looked pretty good, and Aldana just couldn't figure her out. Can Ketlen Vieira figure out Holly Holm? I'm eager to see that. Can Ketlen Vieira get them tangs on her and knock her down? Like, that's the most important part to me, because Vieira, jiu-jitsu black belt, judo black belt.
You just, unlocked something in my brain. Is fighting Holly Holm more of a mental challenge than a physical one, then? Because here's the thing. The people who have beaten Holly Holm have outthought her. Amanda Nunes hit her with a head kick and straight up said after the fight, I wanted to land this head kick. I've been practicing this. There's an opening in her game. So she did kind of outthink her, and that's how she was able to beat her. Miesha Tate. I know I gotta go for a takedown. I know I need this fifth round. It might not look pretty, but I just gotta go for it at this point. And she was sort of able to outthink Miesha Tate. So I guess that's my new... I've never outthink Holly Holm. I guess that's my new sort of revelation. Is that the big thing when you're going in to fight someone like Holly Holm? Do you just need to fight the fight that's best suited towards your style instead of going out there thinking, I have to not fight to her strengths?
Well, I mean, I think, you look at Ketlen Vieira, and what's one skill that we've seen going, or getting better time over time? It's her striking. I mean, again, everybody thinks of the Irene Aldana where Ketlen's, there, and she gets just blasted, and you figure Aldana's going to get a title shot. Nope, you're going to fight Holly Holm, and you're going to lose, and that's the way that it goes. But for Ketlen Vieira, since then, yes, her hands have improved, but her bread gets buttered on the ground. Now, against Yana Kunitskaya, you can make an argument either way. Holding, does that win you the round? With Dominic Cruz, it does, but there's the little rabbit shots. I know rabbit shots are to the back of your head, but the little small punches on the ground, Kunitskaya, so on and so forth. But when I do look at it, can Holly Holm keep it standing? Well, she's a career boxer who's turned into, obviously we know her for the kick against Ronda Rousey, but she's a boxer, but she's continued to face wrestlers, and she's had to improve her game, and we've seen the offensive wrestling in the fight against Megan Anderson. We've seen it against other fighters, but for Holm, she's going to get it done on the feet. She's going to throw the bop, bop, bop kick combination that we've seen for years on end, but nobody can usually figure it out. So for me, I'm intrigued by the fight. I assume it has title implications, which sounds silly. Jermaine Durand to me, is she retired? I don't know. I saw the whispers. You see them out there. But I'm eager to see this fight. I still have Holm. Again, you're 40. You've been off for almost 2 years. What are we going to get? Could Ketlen go out there, grind one out like shit against Miesha Tate? Possibly. But Holm doesn't wear the damage like Tate does. So I'm eager to see what we get out of this fight either way.
I might be switching my pick. Goodness. This is going to be a strange fight because it's going to go one way or the other. Holly Holm is really good at defending takedowns. She is very strong in the clinch, and that's something that isn't talked about enough. She beat Raquel Pennington in their second fight just by out-clinching her. And I know that's weird because Pennington is sort of that grinder. That's what we know her for. But the way that Holm was able to win that fight was underhook, overhook, and I'm holding you against the cage. I think she could do the exact same thing as Ketlin, but the difference is, if Ketlin pulls guard, it's a much bigger threat than if Raquel Pennington were to do something like that. And I do think Ketlin is the much stronger fighter at this stage of their career. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I do think age is starting to catch up to Holly Holm. But with all that being said, I want to pick Ketlin Vieira. I'm going to stick with the Holly Holm pick because every time I switch, it never works out. I'm going to stick with Holly Holm because, again, like you said, when it is going well for her, there really isn't a lot to dislike. She doesn't get hit a lot in her fights unless it's after the bell against Jermaine Durandamy or against Amanda Nunes, one of the best strikers we've ever seen. And she doesn't make these massive mistakes all that often. So I do think for Holmes, she'll be able to keep it on the feet, pitter-patter her way to a decision. It's not going to look pretty, let me tell you that right now. But and a longer fight definitely favors Holly Holm too. Like, let's say the main event and co-main event were swapped. If Ponzinibbio Pereira was 5 rounds, I would like Ponzinibbio much more than I already do. And if this was a 3-round fight, then I might actually pick Ketlin. But I do think the fact that it is 25 minutes does favor Holly Holm.
We shall see what will happen. Danny Mora, high horse, going to Ketlin Vieira. Y'all are biased because Holly's thicker. I don't know about that. I could care less. But when it does come down to this fight, it is a good one. A lot of people predicting this one to go the distance. And Holly Holm, not a knockout artist. And Ketlin Vieira, not necessarily a giant finisher, especially of late. So we'll see how this one plays out. And Matt, the next main event that we have coming up in a couple of weeks, Alexander Volkov, Jairzinho Rosenstrike. For some reason in my mind, I keep thinking, oh, it's Cater and Emmett. But nope. It's that card, and that card should be fun, so I'm looking forward to it. But
that's a fun heavyweight fight, too, honestly. I know both those guys have had a few key losses to, like, the upper echelon guys in the division, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm not excited to watch Alexander Volkov fight Jairzinho Rosenstrike, even after Volkov's last performance against Aspinall. Like, that's a fun fight.
Looks so bad against Mr. Aspinall, but he makes people look bad. Matt, we'll start back over with the entire card. We appreciate everybody who's tuned in. Toss a like, tossed in a super chat. You folks make this show happen. So to recap, I have Elise Reed to beat Sam Hughes, but man, I was split at the start of the week. I was right on the fence. I'm still there right now. I like Sam Hughes being, adding a little bit to her back pocket in the grappling with Fortis MMA. She can definitely get the win over Elise Reed. But likewise, Reed, defensive hips. She beat Corey McKenna last time out, which weighs in my mind too heavily. But if you can beat McKenna, you can beat Sam Hughes. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. I have Elise Reed.
I agree 100%. If this was like a 400-meter dash, it would be a 10-7 Sam Hughes. That's how one-sided this would be. But this is MMA, and I do think Elise Reed is a much better striker in this matchup. And I think she'll be able to use her footwork to defend some of those takedowns.
All right, Matt, we move into our next one. Hooper, Colares, 58% of the fans here on the YouTubes going with Chase Hooper. I'm going with Felipe Colares.
I was going to say, it's not our most popular pick of the week, but I do like Felipe Colares.
I mean, if you're out there, you let us know. Are you a Chase Hooper fan? And likewise, if you're an Alen Amedovski fan, and if you're one of both, boys, oh boys, like that completes the, like a Thundercat. Like you're in the Bermuda Triangle of MMA right there. All right, Matt. So we move into our next one. J-Mart versus Vince Morales. I've got J-Mart to hit a K-Mart, but not go away like K-Mart.
Jonathan Martinez is a much higher level fighter than Vince Morales, at least with his skill set. Now, Vince Morales is the better wrestler. We've seen, how many times in MMA have we seen MMA win out, or MMA fights been won just by wrestling? It happens every single weekend, all the time, multiple times per card. So Morales could wrestle his way to a win, but if Martinez can keep this fight on the feet, I think he should have a lot of success.
All right, Matt, our next fight, we have Morales and Uros Medic. I don't love it, but I'm going to take a flyer on the dog and go with Uros Medic with a size.
This should be an interesting fight. I like Omar Morales just for his steadiness, but this could go any which way.
Yeah, when I get it wrong, it's going to be Omar Morales fights to a steady decision because Uros Medic can't finish him, and Omar Morales is hard to finish. Although, listen, JSP did it the last time out. JSP, big fight coming up. Jailton Almeida taking on Parker Porter. I'm going with Almeida to get the win. Almeida.
I'm more excited for this fight than I should be, just because I think Jailton Almeida really is a top-tier prospect, and I know he's a little bit older, but still, he's got a ground game that is absolutely lights out. It really is. Offensively, defensively, this guy can grapple. He's a really good athlete, too. Like, you see that in his fights at 205, so I do think some of his strength will translate up a weight class at 265 pounds, because he's going to need every ounce of his strength to be able to take a guy and really control a guy like Parker Porter on the map, but I do like Almeida.
This is one of those ones I'm going to be watching with Adam Gase eyes, and if you'd love to see me do like an Adam Gase impression as this show goes on, I could do it. I can make it happen. Both of us with Almeida. Joseph Holmes taking on Alen Amedovski. I have Joseph Holmes, the ugly man, to get his first UFC win. Matt has Alen Amedovski to get his first UFC win. These guys...
And it's a fight that's going to happen.
These guys are going to be scrappy. They're going to be real scrappy. And if one of these guys loses, he's going to be cut from the promotion. And if the other guy loses, he's going to get one more.
I think this is a loser goes home, CM Punk, Jeff Hardy in a steel cage. The difference is there were some extenuating circumstances with Jeff Hardy and his departure from the organization WWE because he failed a couple drug tests. But I do have Alen Amedovski.
Cody Ewell, you better pay to play if you're going to...
I vividly remember my dad driving me to school growing up and him being like, did you hear about Jeff Hardy? He's not going to be in the organization anymore. And then the next week was supposed to be Jeff Hardy versus CM Punk, and the loser not only wasn't going to get the belt, they were going to have to leave. I didn't figure that out at a young age, that he was about to lose. And then next thing you know, no more Jeff Hardy every Friday night on SmackDown.
All right,
I'm
Matt,
sorry.
We will move along. Eryk Anders, Jin Park. I have South Korea's Jin Park. Got a Korean top team to get the win. Do you?
So do I.
Do you? Were you in an Adam Gase moment?
I'm going to be honest. Your handoffs have not been great this episode.
Polyana Viana's taking on Tabatha Ricci. Ricci, this fight should not be on the main card of anything. Going with Tabatha Ricci, barely.
Again, this is a fight where Polyana Viana can use her physicality and her size. She could have a lot of success because Ricci's striking is quite sloppy, but I do think she has the better ground game in this matchup, and at some point these two will probably be grappling.
Yeah, this one's a bad one. Chidi and Jokwani, Disco Todorovic going with Chidi Bang Bang to get the win.
I also have Njokuani. I think he had a harder fight in his UFC debut than he does today.
Kyle OM doesn't like CM Punk for what he did to Jeff, but do you like CM Punk for what he did to Mike Jackson? That was a loss. Wayne Kerr the second hitting up a big super chat.
Thank you, Wayne.
Let's get into it. Good luck tonight, boys. Wayne Kerr, appreciated. Lord Nikon hitting up the super chat. About to get some in and out, play some 2K on Steam Deck, and enjoy a great day of fighting.
Sounds like a pretty good Saturday to me.
Enjoy that, Lord Nikon. Our comp to in and out close by would be what, like a Harvey's? I guess because it's regional. People would like it if you're Canadian.
I'm happy to see so many other people are really sad that Jeff Hardy got kicked out of the WWE.
Cody Ewell, we
Punk.
made it. We made it. Adam Gase, premier coach, both of us with Njokuani. We're split on this one. Pereira, Ponzinibbio, but I love the fight, right?
This is the fight everyone's going to be talking about after the event's over. I don't care what happens with Holly Holm, Caitlin Vieira. Like, this fight's probably going to end by finish, and probably a crazy one at that. And if it does go to a decision, we're going to get 15 minutes of one of the best fights of the year. I have Ponzinibbio, you have Pereira, but I think we can both see where the other one's coming from.
Should be a fun one, and in the main event, I guess, it's not as fun. If you were to go out there, if I was to go out there, stand at a podium and go, Caitlin Vieira's going to win this fight, and here's why.
Boo!
Yeah,
and then do the same for Holly Holm.
Yeah, and then if it happened, a lot of people would get excited. But I mean, yeah, I'm going to go with Holly Holm. She's been out for a long time. I'm staying away from everything on this card, popcorn in it, because the last couple weeks haven't been great, as we mentioned. But I do like the consistency out of Holm when she's actually in the cage, when she's fighting, her volume, defensive hips, and we'll see if Vieira's able to take her down and keep her down.
And the good thing about Holm is she's pretty much the same fighter in the first round as she is in the fifth round. Very good cardio, and I don't expect her to fall off some cliff with her movement unless Father Time has finally caught up to her and said, hey, it's time to let some new contenders fight for the belt, because that could very well happen. And I think this will be the fight which we can tell, okay, has Holly Holm started to age, or can she still be competitive with these top-tier fighters?
JB hitting up the super chat. You guys have great energy. Keep it going, and thanks for the insights. JB from the 6 from TO. JB, the Jays have a game coming up. They won yesterday. The Yankees are playing right now. There's all kinds of great baseball going on.
Nasty Nestor on the mound.
Nasty Nestor for those Yanks against the Sox. Matt, I'm really looking forward to this card. We have, of course, Volkov, Rosenstrike coming up. Not next weekend, the weekend after. Next weekend is a big-time one. It's an exciting one. I'm going golfing for a couple of days away, 36 holes. This weekend's Victoria Day, so if you're celebrating that on Monday...
Yeah, enjoy your long weekend, guys.
Yeah, that should be fun. And in the States, it's, Patriots Day? Is that what they have down there? They're wearing those baseball hats right now and the socks with the camo. So for us... I guess you could wear Regal stuff.
We have our own long weekend to celebrate.
Yeah, we have our own one. We're going to stay with that one. But appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll have some content out next week. The pairing counters out there. Derek of Rivia that's over in that chat is always saying, you got to change, you got to change, you got to ask the questions. So hit up the pairing counter. Try and throw a couple of those your way this week. And hopefully you enjoy the fights coming up this weekend. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it. And a great show. And thank you for those super chats.